I'm Samantha, 28 years old, and my wedding day should have been perfect. Ethan and I had planned everything down to the last detail. Then my card declined while paying for my hair. Checking my phone, I saw all my accounts frozen. The bank confirmed what I couldn't believe. My parents had done this. They'd controlled my whole life, but this crossed every line. What they didn't expect was that I'd find a way to fight back. Nobody imagined I'd end up freezing their retirement fund, but when you corner someone on their wedding day, expect consequences. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from, hit like and subscribe to see how I turn the tables on the people who should have supported me on the most important day of my life. Growing up as the only child of Barbara and Richard Thompson meant living under a microscope. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Mansion in the suburbs, luxury cars in the driveway, and family portraits where we all wore coordinating outfits. But behind closed doors, my parents micromanaged every aspect of my existence. My father built his empire as an investment banker, working with high-profile clients and making millions before he turned 40. Mother maintained our family's social status, chairing charity committees and hosting dinner parties for the elite of our community. Their world revolved around appearances, connections, and climbing higher on the social ladder. My childhood memories consist of piano lessons I never wanted, debutante classes that bored me to tears, and summer camps focused on leadership that were really just networking opportunities for children of the wealthy. I wasn't allowed to choose my own clothes until high school, and even then, Mother would accidentally return items she deemed inappropriate. When college application time came around, there was no discussion about where I would apply. Father had attended Princeton, so I would too. I wanted to study art history, but they insisted on economics. Art is a hobby, Samantha, not a career, Father would say with that dismissive wave of his hand. Mother would add, think of your future, darling. No one important marries an art teacher. I complied. I always did. Rebellion seemed impossible when they controlled everything from my tuition to my monthly allowance. After graduation, Father secured me a position at his friend's financial firm. I was miserable analyzing market trends and investment portfolios, but I smiled through weekly family dinners when they asked about work. Dating under their watchful eyes was another exercise in frustration. Mother would arrange accidental meetings with the sons of her friends. Young lawyers, doctors, and businessmen who bored me to tears but looked good on paper. Any boy I actually liked mysteriously received cold treatment or wasn't included in family event invitations. Then I met Ethan Miller at a literacy volunteer program. I joined secretly, craving something meaningful outside my suffocating job. Ethan was a kindergarten teacher with kind eyes, infinite patience, and a laugh that made everyone around him smile. He came from a middle-class family in a small town 3 hours away. His father worked as a mail carrier, and his mother was a nurse at the local hospital. They were warm, genuine people who hugged me the first time we met. When I introduced Ethan to my parents, the temperature in our formal living room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Mother's smile froze in place, and Father barely looked up from his phone during dinner. Later, Mother cornered me in the kitchen. He seems nice, dear, but a kindergarten teacher? What does he make? $40,000 a year. You can't build a future on that. Their disapproval only strengthened our bond. For the first time, I was fighting for something that was truly mine. Ethan supported me through tearful phone calls after family arguments. He helped me see the manipulation that I'd grown up considering normal. With his encouragement, I started seeing a therapist to unpack my complicated family dynamics. When Ethan proposed after 2 years of dating, it was with a modest diamond ring that he'd saved for months to buy. I said yes immediately, crying happy tears as we sat on the bench in the park where we'd had our first date. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house alone to share the news. We need to discuss this, Father said, his voice cold as he studied the ring on my finger. You're making a hasty decision. I've been with Ethan for 2 years, I replied. He'll expect you to support him, Mother chimed in. Men like that always do. I left in tears that day, but Ethan and I began planning our wedding anyway. My parents remained distant, but after several tense family dinners, they reluctantly agreed to contribute financially. It's tradition for the bride's family to pay, Mother said, though her tone made it clear this was a transaction, not a gift. We just want what's best for you. I should have recognized those words for the warning they were. In my family, what's best for you always meant what we want for you. But I was too caught up in wedding dreams to see the control mechanisms still operating beneath the surface. Ethan and I originally envisioned a garden wedding at a historic estate with wildflowers, string lights, and only our closest friends and family. We wanted something intimate and meaningful, reflecting our values rather than extravagance. That dream quickly evaporated once my parents got involved. What started as helpful suggestions quickly became commands. Mother called the garden venue quaint, in that tone that really meant cheap and embarrassing. Within a week, she had canceled our deposit and booked the Lakeside Country Club instead. The Andersons' daughter was married there last spring, she informed me, sliding the glossy brochure across the table. Everyone who matters attends events there. Our guest list of 75 ballooned to 200 as Mother added business associates, golf club members, and social connections to the spreadsheet. When I protested, Father stepped in. We're paying for this, Samantha. These people are important to our family. I tried explaining to Ethan's parents why the small family dinner they'd planned for the rehearsal was now being moved to an upscale restaurant. Mrs. Miller, with her kind eyes so much like her son's, just patted my hand and said, "We want you to have the day you want, dear." The guilt was overwhelming. The dress shopping expedition became another battleground. I'd found a simple, elegant gown at a boutique, but Mother insisted we visit Bergdorf's, where she'd arranged a private showing. After I tried on 17 dresses, she selected a heavily beaded ball gown with a cathedral train. "But I can barely move in this," I protested, struggling to sit down in the fitting room. "No one cares if you're comfortable, darling. They care if you look appropriate," she replied, already handing over her credit card to the attendant. My maid of honor, Jessica, witnessed this exchange with narrowing eyes. We'd been friends since college, where she was one of the few people who saw through my carefully constructed, agreeable facade. After Mother stepped out to take a call, Jessica turned to me. "Sam, this isn't your wedding anymore. You know that, right?" I blinked back tears. "They're paying for everything. And they're making sure you know it. There's always a price with them, and it's never just money." Jessica was right, but confronting my parents seemed impossible. Every time I tried setting boundaries, they responded with thinly veiled threats about reconsidering their involvement. The translation was clear. Do what we want or lose the financial support. Ethan remained my rock through the escalating tension. "We could postpone," he suggested one night after I'd received 14 texts from Mother about the table centerpieces. "Save up and do this our way." I considered it, but the momentum felt unstoppable. Invitations had been sent, deposits paid. And some childish part of me still craved my parents' approval, still believed that perhaps the perfect wedding would finally make them see me as an adult capable of making my own choices. 3 weeks before the wedding, everything came to a head over the seating chart. Mother had placed Ethan's family at the farthest table from the main wedding party, while positioning her social committee friends prominently. "This is unacceptable," I said, finally finding my voice. "Ethan's parents should be at the front with you and Dad." "Don't be dramatic, Samantha," Mother replied. "The Millers will hardly know anyone. They'll be more comfortable with the other out-of-town guests. The Millers will be my family too after the wedding. They deserve respect." Father looked up from his newspaper. "If you're going to be difficult about every little detail, perhaps we should discuss whether this wedding should happen at all." The room went silent. Mother's expression remained neutral, but her eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of having the upper hand. I swallowed my pride and backed down, as I always had. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of final fittings, beauty appointments, and forced smiles. At the rehearsal dinner, the contrast between our families was painfully obvious. The Millers brought thoughtful gifts for my parents and shared genuine stories about Ethan's childhood. My parents responded with practiced politeness and subtle condescension. As I went to bed the night before my wedding, a strange uneasiness settled over me. I chalked it up to normal pre-wedding jitters, never imagining what would await me in the morning. I woke up on my wedding day to sunshine streaming through the hotel suite's windows and a fluttering mixture of excitement and nerves. Jessica arrived early with coffee and breakfast pastries, helping me settle in before the hairstylist and makeup artist were scheduled to arrive. Everything seemed perfect as I slipped into the silk robe Mother had insisted on purchasing for these pre-ceremony photos. The hairstylist, Maria, arrived promptly at 9. After an hour of creating an intricate updo, she finished with a spritz of hairspray and a wide smile. "You look beautiful," she said, packing up her tools. "That'll be $400. I reached for my purse and pulled out my credit card, the one linked to my personal checking account. Maria ran it through her portable reader and frowned. "I'm sorry, it's saying declined." "That's weird," I said, feeling the first flutter of alarm. "Try my debit card instead." She ran the second card with the same result. My cheeks burned with embarrassment as I fumbled through my wallet for a third card. "Let me try this one," I said, handing over the emergency credit card I rarely used. "Declined again." "I'm so sorry," I stammered, pulling out my phone to check my banking app. There must be some mistake. But when I logged in, my stomach dropped. All my accounts showed zero balances, with alerts indicating they had been frozen. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Jessica noticed immediately.
"Sam?
"What's wrong?" "My accounts, they're all frozen. I can't access anything." Jessica immediately handed the stylist cash from her own wallet, then sat beside me on the bed as I called the bank's customer service line. After 20 minutes of security questions and being placed on hold, the representative returned with information that felt like a physical blow. "Miss Thompson, your accounts have a temporary freeze placed on them by the secondary account holders, Barbara and Richard Thompson. This was processed yesterday afternoon." My parents froze my accounts? But why would they? My voice trailed off as the realization hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I hung up and immediately tried calling my parents. Both phones went straight to voicemail. I left increasingly desperate messages, my voice cracking as panic set in. "They did this on purpose," I whispered to Jessica. "They waited until today, when they knew I'd have no time to fix it." Jessica's expression hardened. "Call Ethan.
Now."
15 minutes later, Ethan burst into the suite, still wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of his wedding tuxedo. One look at my face told him everything. "The venue just called me," he said, taking my hands in his. "The final payment was reversed overnight. They're threatening to cancel everything unless we can pay the balance in full within the hour." I collapsed against him, tears streaming down my face, ruining the makeup that had just been applied. My parents froze all my accounts. They're not answering their phones. I don't understand why they would do this today of all days. Ethan held me tight, his heartbeat steady against my cheek. "Do you want to postpone? We can figure this out." The makeup artist arrived, taking in the scene with wide eyes as Jessica quickly explained the situation. My phone kept buzzing with incoming calls, the florist, the caterer, the photographer, all reporting that payments had been reversed or checks had bounced. Every vendor was threatening to cancel. Jessica gathered the bridesmaids in the adjoining room, and I could hear them pooling cash and available credit. Ethan's parents called, immediately offering their savings, but it was nowhere near enough to cover the lavish wedding my parents had insisted upon. "Maybe we should just go to the courthouse," I said, wiping my eyes. This whole thing was a mistake. Ethan looked at me carefully. "Is that what you want? Or is that what they want you to say?" His question cut through the panic. This was exactly what they wanted, for everything to fall apart so completely that I'd have no choice but to cancel the wedding and come crawling back to them. "No," I said, finding clarity through the tears. "I want to marry you today. I don't care about the venue or the flowers or the 4-tier cake. I just want to be your wife." Jessica returned, determination written across her face. "Then let's make it happen." Just as we were frantically calling smaller venues for last-minute availability, Ethan's brother Michael knocked on the suite door. He had arrived early to help with setup and heard about the financial disaster. "I just got approved for a new credit card last week," he said, pulling out his wallet. $15,000 limit. Will that help? The relief was so overwhelming I actually hugged him hard enough to make him stumble backward. With Michael's card, we could at least secure the venue and basic catering, though many of the extras would have to be canceled. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of emergency calls and quick decisions. The elaborate floral arrangements were scaled back to simple centerpieces. The string quartet was canceled. The champagne toast would now be with whatever house wine the venue could provide. The cake remained only because it had been fully paid for weeks ago. Through it all, I cycled between tears, rage, and a strange sense of freedom. Every scaled-back decision felt like removing another layer of my parents' influence from what should have been my day. I was just finishing a revised makeup application when Jessica peeked into the bathroom. "They're here," she said quietly. "Your parents just arrived at the venue." My hands gripped the counter. Acting like nothing happened? Exactly like that. "Your mother is already complaining about the reduced flowers." I took a deep breath, studying my reflection. Despite everything, I was going to be a bride today. Tell them I want to see them. Alone. Before the ceremony, Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." 20 minutes later, I stood in a small private room off the main hall, still in my robe, as my parents walked in. Mother looked immaculate in her blue designer dress, not a hair out of place. Father adjusted his cufflinks, his expression neutral. "Darling, you're not even dressed yet," Mother said, checking her watch. "The ceremony is in an hour." "Why did you freeze my accounts?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. They exchanged a look before Father cleared his throat. "We felt you needed time to reconsider this hasty decision." "Hasty? We've been engaged for 10 months. With that man," Mother said, her smile tight. "Samantha, we're protecting your future. You're about to throw away everything we've built for you by marrying someone I love." "Love doesn't pay mortgages," Father replied coldly. "Look at the chaos today. This is what life with him will be, scrambling to make ends meet, embarrassed in front of vendors." I stared at them, finally seeing with complete clarity. "You caused this chaos. You waited until my wedding day to humiliate me, to show me how dependent I am on your money." Mother stepped forward, adjusting a strand of my hair with cold fingers. "We can fix everything. The accounts can be unfrozen immediately. The vendors can be paid. All you need to do is postpone the wedding and take some time to think." "You mean all I need to do is obey?" "Don't be dramatic," Father sighed. "You have a choice to make. Continue with this farce of a ceremony, or come home with us and secure your financial future." In that moment, something broke inside me. Not my heart, but the chains I'd allowed them to place around my life. I stepped back from Mother's touch. "I'm getting married today. To Ethan. Without your blessing or your money." The ceremony was nothing like the extravaganza originally planned. I walked down the aisle alone, having refused Father's arm. My dress was still the beaded monstrosity Mother had chosen, but somehow it didn't matter anymore. Ethan's face, when he saw me, contained everything I needed. Our vows, which we had planned to keep traditional, transformed in the moment. I spoke about choosing love over security, truth over appearances. Ethan promised to build a real home with me, not just a showcase house. There wasn't a dry eye among our true friends. My parents sat stonily in the front row, Mother's spine rigid with disapproval. They didn't speak during the scaled-back reception and left before the first dance, without saying goodbye. As Ethan and I swayed to the music, a playlist from someone's phone connected to the venue's speakers rather than the band we'd booked, he leaned down to whisper in my ear, "Proud of you, Mrs. Miller." For the first time that day, I smiled without reservation. Mrs. Miller. No longer a Thompson. No longer theirs to control. The honeymoon we had planned, 2 weeks in the Greek islands, was immediately canceled. Instead of white sand beaches and crystal blue waters, we returned to our tiny one-bedroom apartment, where the reality of our financial situation quickly set in. The first shock came when I checked my student account and discovered my tuition payment for my final MBA semester had been reversed. I was 3 months from graduation, but without that payment, I wouldn't be allowed to complete my degree. "They can't do this," Ethan said as I stared at the laptop screen in disbelief. "You're an adult. How can they just pull money they've already paid?" A call to the university financial office revealed the ugly truth. The payment had been made directly from my parents' account, not mine, giving them full rights to reverse it. The financial aid deadline had long passed, leaving me with no options to secure emergency funding. "You could take a semester off," Ethan suggested gently. "Save up and go back." But we both knew how the job market worked. A gap in education raised questions, and without the completed degree, my resume would move to the bottom of every pile. Our budget, already tight on Ethan's teacher salary, became a daily source of stress. I applied for waitressing jobs, swallowing my pride as I handed applications to restaurant managers who glanced at my partial MBA with confusion. 3 rejections later, I finally landed an evening shift at a diner 15 blocks from our apartment. My new routine became a punishing cycle. Classes in the morning when I could still attend as an enrolled student, job hunting during the afternoon, waitressing from 5 until midnight, then studying until my eyes burned. Ethan would wait up for me most nights, making sure I ate something before collapsing into bed. Friends helped where they could. Jessica loaned us enough to cover 1 month's rent when we fell behind. Ethan's brother Michael brought groceries every Sunday, pretending he'd accidentally bought too much food. His parents sent care packages with homemade cookies and small gift cards tucked inside. My parents maintained complete silence. No calls, no texts, not even a formal disownment, just absence, as if I had ceased to exist the moment I chose Ethan over their control. Some nights I cried over this abandonment, while other times I felt nothing but cold relief at being free from their manipulation. The emotional toll became impossible to ignore. I started having panic attacks before job interviews, terrified of rejection. My weight dropped as stress killed my appetite. Ethan worried constantly, his normally cheerful face lined with concern when he thought I wasn't looking. After one particularly difficult day, being turned down for a bank teller position because my degree wasn't complete, I finally agreed to see a therapist that Jessica had recommended. Dr. Manning specialized in family trauma, and our first session was like lancing a wound. "Your parents created a dependency by design," she explained after hearing my story. "Every gift came with invisible strings. Every opportunity was actually a leash." "But they're my parents," I said, the words painful to speak. "They were supposed to love me." "They do love you in their way," she replied carefully. "But they never learned to separate love from control." Those therapy sessions became my anchor over the next months. Slowly, I began reconstructing my identity, not as the perfect daughter of Barbara and Richard Thompson, but as Samantha Miller, a woman finding her own path. Ethan and I celebrated small victories together. My first full month of tips at the diner. His students' successful spring concert. Learning to cook inexpensive but delicious meals in our tiny kitchen. Making love with the windows open because we couldn't afford air conditioning. There was freedom in our struggle, a pureness that my previous life had lacked. 3 months after the wedding, while cleaning our apartment for Ethan's parents' visit, I found a folder of financial documents I'd brought from my old place. Most were irrelevant now. Investment statements for accounts I no longer had access to, property information for the vacation condo my parents had once promised would be mine. But tucked in the back was something that made my heart race. Trust fund documentation with my name listed as both beneficiary and co-trustee. The trust fund documents were from when I was 8 years old. My grandparents had established it, naming me as the beneficiary with my parents as trustees until I turned 25. What caught my attention was a detail I'd never noticed before. After my 25th birthday, I had been added as a co-trustee, not just a beneficiary. I called my college friend Taylor, who had gone on to become a financial advisor. After explaining the situation, I emailed her scanned copies of the documents. "This is interesting," she said during our call the next day. "Being a co-trustee gives you significant rights, including access to information about the trust's investments." "But I've never exercised those rights," I replied, trying to understand. "I didn't even know I had them." "That's probably what your parents counted on. But legally, you have been able to view all trust activity for the past 3 years." Further digging with Taylor's help revealed something even more shocking. The trust, originally valued at around $200,000, had grown substantially through investments. But my parents had been using it as a feeder account for their own retirement fund, technically legal as long as equivalent value remained for the beneficiary, but ethically questionable. "The interesting part," Taylor explained, "is that your status as co-trustee extends to any accounts directly fed by the original trust. That includes their retirement fund." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "It means you have legal authority to place a temporary administrative freeze on those accounts, just like they did to yours." I sat with this information for days, turning it over in my mind. The power to strike back was tempting, but I wasn't sure if I could cross that line. Ethan noticed my distraction and finally confronted me one evening. "Something's going on," he said, sitting beside me on our second-hand couch. "You've been somewhere else mentally all week." I showed him the documents and explained what Taylor had told me. His expression grew, increasingly concerned. "Sam, I understand why this is tempting, but it sounds like playing with fire. There could be serious consequences. Like what they did to me on our wedding day." I asked, my voice rising. "They try to destroy the most important day of our lives to maintain control over me. And I hate them for that," Ethan said, taking my hands. "But becoming like them won't heal what they've done." His words stung because they contained truth. I was contemplating using the same tactics my parents had used against me, financial manipulation as a weapon. Jessica had a different take when I confided in her the next day over coffee. "They declared financial war first," she said bluntly. "They're counting on you being too ethical to fight back." "But what if this makes me just like them?" "The difference is motivation," she argued. "They froze your accounts to control you. You'd be doing this to free yourself." I spent another week researching the legal ramifications. As co-trustee, I had the right to initiate a review of the account if I suspected improper management. During such a review, a temporary freeze was standard procedure. It would be uncomfortable for my parents, but not financially devastating, just as they had done to me. The day I decided to act, my hands trembled as I completed the paperwork. Taylor had walked me through the process, confirming that everything was legally within my rights. One final signature, one submission to the financial institution, and it was done. 3 hours later, my phone exploded with notifications. First came text messages from Father, unusually emotional. "What have you done?" Then voicemails from Mother, her voice shrill with panic about being unable to access their accounts. I didn't respond immediately, letting the reality of their situation sink in. Only when Father's messages became threats of legal action did I finally text back. "I'm available to discuss this in person whenever you're ready." The following evening, our apartment doorbell rang without warning. Through the peephole, I could see my parents standing in the hallway, both looking less polished than I'd ever seen them. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in immediately. "You've gone too far," Father said, his face flushed. "Reverse what you've done immediately. Just like you reversed the freeze on my accounts after the wedding?" I asked calmly. "This is different," Mother hissed. "You're interfering with our livelihood." "You interfered with my education, my marriage, and my future," I replied. "Please come in. The neighbors don't need to hear this." They entered our small apartment with obvious distaste, neither taking a seat when offered. Father pulled out his phone, jabbing at the screen. "I've already spoken to our lawyer. What you've done constitutes financial fraud. We could have you arrested." I retrieved my folder of documents from the side table and handed it to him. "Actually, as co-trustee of the Thompson Family Trust since my 25th birthday, I have every legal right to initiate a review of connected accounts if mismanagement is suspected. The temporary freeze is standard procedure during such a review." The color drained from his face as he flipped through the papers, recognizing the legal language that mirrored his own tactics. "This is ridiculous," Mother said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We've managed that trust for your benefit, including the multiple transfers to your personal retirement account." I asked. "The ones that accelerated right before my wedding day?" Silence fell as they realized I had done my homework. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in my father's eyes, the recognition that he was no longer in control of the situation. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice low. "The same thing I've always wanted," I answered honestly. "My independence." 2 weeks after my parents' unexpected visit, we met in a conference room at Taylor's office building. My parents brought their financial advisor and lawyer. I had Taylor and a legal consultant she had recommended. The atmosphere was tense but professional as we all took our seats around the polished table. "Let's be clear about our objectives today," Taylor began, her confidence bolstering my own. "We're here to negotiate a fair resolution that acknowledges Samantha's rights as co-trustee and beneficiary." My parents' lawyer presented their position first, that the trust had always been managed for my benefit, and that my actions were retaliatory rather than based on genuine concern about mismanagement. It was a reasonable argument, but it fell apart when Taylor presented documentation of the activity patterns. "In the 3 months leading up to Samantha's wedding," she explained, displaying a chart on her tablet, "withdrawals from the trust to the senior Thompson's retirement account increased by 300%. These withdrawals coincided precisely with the timeline of wedding planning and stopped the day after the wedding accounts were frozen." My father shifted uncomfortably as his own advisor confirmed the pattern. What followed was a detailed examination of years of financial manipulation. We discovered that my childhood accounts, the ones I'd believed were being saved for my future, had been systematically drained and reinvested under my parents' complete control. "The intent seems clear," my consultant stated, "to maintain financial dependence well into adulthood." As the meeting progressed, I watched my parents' expressions shift from indignation to resignation. Their lawyer whispered something to my father, who nodded grimly before clearing his throat. "We're prepared to discuss settlement terms," he said, his business voice unable to completely mask his discomfort. The agreement we eventually reached was straightforward. My educational expenses would be paid in full from the trust as originally intended. A portion of the funds would be transferred to an account in my name alone to establish financial independence. In exchange, I would lift the freeze on their retirement accounts and relinquish my co-trustee status after the agreed transfers were complete. When we stood to leave, Mother approached me while Father spoke with their lawyer. "This wasn't necessary," she said softly. "If you needed money, you could have just asked." "This wasn't about money," I replied. "It was about control." She blinked, genuinely confused. "We only wanted what was best for you." "No," I said, finding compassion despite everything. "You wanted what you thought was best for your vision of me. There's a difference." With the tuition payment restored, I completed my final semester and graduated with my MBA. Ethan stood cheering in the audience alongside Jessica and his family. My parents had been invited, but sent their regrets with a formal card and a check that I considered returning before finally depositing. It was the first financial gift from them that felt like it truly came without strings. Ethan and I decided to use part of my trust fund money to relocate to Denver, where both of us found promising job opportunities. He at a progressive private school, and I at a small marketing firm that valued my combination of financial knowledge and creative thinking. Our apartment was still modest, but it was ours, filled with furniture we chose together and decorated with photographs of the people who truly supported us. Contact with my parents became limited, but didn't disappear entirely. Our interactions were formal at first, holiday cards and occasional brief phone calls that carefully avoided any mention of the financial confrontation. 6 months after our move, they visited Denver on business and asked to meet for dinner. The restaurant conversation was strained but civil. They commented on my new job and asked appropriate questions about Ethan's work. Just as dessert arrived, Father surprised me by addressing the elephant in the room. "We may have been overly involved in your financial affairs," he said, studying his coffee cup. Coming from him, This awkward statement was practically an apology. Mother added, "We had certain expectations for your life that perhaps weren't fair." It wasn't a complete recognition of the control they had exerted, but it was a start. As we parted that evening, Mother hugged me briefly, the first physical contact since the wedding. "You look happy," she said, sounding genuinely puzzled. "I am happy," I replied. "Just not in the way you imagined I should be." 1 year after our wedding day disaster, Ethan and I celebrated our anniversary with a picnic in a local park rather than the lavish dinner my parents would have expected. As we shared wine from plastic cups and watched the sunset, I reflected on everything that had changed. "Do you regret it?" Ethan asked. "Standing up to them the way you did?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it." Our small apartment might never impress my parents' social circle. My marketing salary combined with Ethan's teaching income would never match what I could have made following my father's career path. But we had something my parents had never understood the value of: genuine connection, mutual respect, and the joy of building a life on our own terms. The journey from financial dependence to independence had been painful, but necessary. I'd learned that true support uplifts rather than controls, that love without conditions is the only kind worth having, and that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire to break free from toxic patterns. Most importantly, I discovered my own strength, not the superficial strength my parents had tried to program into me, but the authentic resilience that comes from facing difficult truths and making hard choices. If you've ever had to stand up to controlling family members or break free from toxic relationships, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Was there a moment when you finally drew the line? How did you find the courage to choose your own path? Don't forget to like this video if you found it helpful, subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share with anyone who might need encouragement to set healthy boundaries. Remember, sometimes the family we build is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey to independence.